I just want to take it back pre-Unplanned. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Would you describe yourself as a pro-life person, or was the movie something that changed your mind on this issue?
I was what I would say was middle of the road. I considered myself pro-life. I knew that I would never have an abortion, but I didn't want to impose on anyone else's choice, which essentially means that I'm pro-choice. And I just didn't know it at the time. And then when I got the audition to portray Abby, I looked her up afterwards and I heard her testimony for the first time, and I realized that I had been so blind, that I really had no idea what happened during an abortion procedure. And hearing her story is what completely changed my heart, and I've been very passionately pro-life since then.
Thank God for that. So you said, Ashley, that your eyes were opened, especially, and I think even for a lot of people here today, even for people like myself who've been involved with the pro-life movement for many years, to see that abortion procedure, it's an eye-opener for anybody. What was it like trying to actually create that scene and to have to get into that mindset? I mean, people might know in that scene the doctor was formerly an abortion doctor. You had a nurse in there who used to work in an abortion clinic. How do you get into that headspace?
For that scene in particular, I have a 9-year-old son. And so when I was thinking about this scene and I'm watching the monitor, which for me was blank, there was nothing on the screen except for a little piece of tape. So I just had to really imagine what she described. And in that moment, I just thought about my son and what it might be like if he didn't exist. And it made me so sad because I love him so much, and it makes my heart want to burst that I love him so much. So thinking about the idea of his life never existing, it was just heartbreaking.
Because your son that you mentioned there, Ashley, he was an unplanned pregnancy.
He was.
It's heartbreaking to think of the women in the movie that we're following, some of their stories where they're facing an unplanned pregnancy. And like that powerful but absolutely devastating moment where you see an empty womb, you know, the baby is no more. Did you think about that? Did you think about your first scans and kind of connect that up with the film?
You know, it wasn't until I saw the finished product. I mean, I felt it very strongly when I was acting it out. But when I saw the film for the first time, I was devastated all over again. And thinking about it and seeing it again today, every single time I watch it, it's incredibly difficult. It never gets easier to see that happen. And we didn't do that. We didn't create this image for shock and awe. We did it because it's real. We didn't do it just to shock people and terrify them. We did it to educate people because that's what happens, and people just don't know.
And yet, probably in many of the places where the film has opened, you've had people protesting, basically not wanting people to see the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's been the case. I think that most of the protests have been much smaller than the media has portrayed. The one that happened in Canada, there were about 10 people outside of a theater. And in the news, it looked like there were so many of them. But some pro-lifers that were there took a picture of the overall scene, and there were 10 people. So don't you love how the media twists things?
Well, just on that, because I've been going through a lot of the questions, and many people have asked this question. They've asked, has the movie affected your career in a positive way or in a negative way? And has the response that you've gotten mostly, has it been positive or negative?
From the general public, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. I've engaged with a lot of pro-choicers as well, and I've found that the quickest way to disarm someone is with kindness, which can be challenging sometimes, but it's worth it. And with the film industry, it's also propelled my career. Doors have opened and incredible opportunities have presented themselves. Well, I think that's what happens when you say yes to God, though. Anytime that you honor what God is asking you to do, I feel like He puts a barrier of protection around you, and He also promotes you. And right now I'm in early development for producing my own film. So.
It's a very difficult thing, I would imagine, from a Hollywood perspective, to be out there like you are with your pro-life position, and not only be out there with your position, but in a movie that's really promoting that message. The courage is really laudable. Do you think, and please God, you'll have given, I know you were saying to me earlier, there's a lot of Hollywood actors that they are pro-life, but they're keeping it quiet. Do you think you'll give them courage to kind of speak their mind?
I hope so. I think that a couple more people are starting to come out about their views and not live in fear. For some reason, there's this perspective that the public doesn't think that actors are allowed to have opinions. They're like, just perform. And I'm like, well, we have opinions too, and I want to be able to use my platform in a way that helps people. And I'm hoping that others are going to do the same and not live in fear as I see my career continue to move forward. They'll know there's nothing to live in fear of. Just be authentic and truthful.
And as you say, doors are continuing to open for you, and long may that continue. One of the things, Ashley, that you've been doing that's incredible is, and we've talked about it today, is practical supports. Tell us a little bit about the scholarship program that you've started.
After the movie premiered in the States, I started getting a lot of messages from girls who were experiencing crisis pregnancies, unplanned pregnancies, just saying, I'm going to have to give up going to school, I'm never going to be able to have a future, get a job. And it was a very common story. And I thought, well, this is a really simple problem to solve. If girls are in need of financial assistance or a babysitter or resources, then we have a means to provide that. So why don't we do that? And I partnered with an organization called Heartbeat International that has pregnancy resource centers all over the world. And I said, how do you guys feel about partnering and doing this and creating this scholarship fund to help girls who choose life for their children and want to go back to school and get their degrees? And they loved it. It was really easy to get started. We'll be awarding girls starting next year $5,000 per year while they're in school. And it also connects them to a resource within their community where they're getting mentored, they're getting classes for parenting, they're getting diapers. All the things that they might really need are right there at their fingertips. And I wanted to leave a legacy of helping people with the movie as well.
It's incredible, and well done for your work on that. One of the questions, Ashley, that people asked was just a response from your friends and family when you took on the role. You had a particularly poignant conversation with your mother. Tell us about that.
I was cast in Unplanned in a very non-traditional way. I got a phone call from the producer, and he said, I'm so happy to offer you the role of Abby Johnson. Can you get on a plane in 4 hours? 4 hours, not days, 4 hours. And God had really prepared me for that moment, I think, because without hesitation, I was able to say yes and just go. And my husband is a really good man. So I left, got on the plane, and everything was happening so fast. I was in pre-production meetings. I was getting fitted for wardrobe, having my hair colored, all kinds of things. And on the 4th day that I was there, my mother called me, and she had no idea where I was. I had not had time to tell her. I was a little bit nervous to share Abby's story with her because I knew that when she was in high school, she'd had an abortion. And if you've seen the film, as most of you have now, you know that the movie is not about condemnation or judgment. It is just filled with the forgiveness and the overwhelming grace of God. So I wanted to make sure that she understood that. And as I explained Abby's story, she just completely broke down. She was sobbing through the phone. She said, Ashley, I need to tell you something that I never told you before. What you don't know is when I was 19 years old, I was in the abortion clinic for the 2nd time. And I had called my name. I was on the table being examined by a very pregnant nurse. I got really sick to my stomach. I knew that I couldn't go through with it. And I got up, walked out, and I chose to have you.
How did you feel in that moment? Because what was going to happen after that was you had to understand and imagine that position that your mother was in, understand that woman that was, there's a scene in the movie where you're lying on the abortion table. You must have thought of your mother while she was carrying you.
Yeah, it was a very strange feeling to describe. I mentioned to you earlier, it was kind of like a near-death experience, if I could describe it in some way, where you just have a flashback of everything that you've done in your life and all the relationships you have, and you realize that you were only seconds or minutes away from never experiencing that. It was a very sobering moment. But I was also really grateful to her. I was never mad or angry. I was just so grateful that she'd given me life. And when she saw the movie, she said to me that she could remember tasting the crackers in the room. She could remember the taste. One really beautiful thing that a lot of people don't know is my mom is actually in the movie. So at the end, where different people are placing roses in the fence, my mom places a rose in the fence for her previous abortion.
It's an extremely poignant part of the film, and I'd imagine you've had women who've gotten in touch with you as well who've had abortions that the film has impacted them. And what sort of reaction have you had from women who perhaps have felt totally betrayed by the lie that they were told that abortion would solve their problems?
I think there's a mix. It's like they're going through the grieving process, honestly, for the first time. And a lot of them are angry at first. They feel they've been deceived. But the movie has brought about a lot of healing. I have women come to me and tell me their very personal, vulnerable stories. And they're just so grateful. They're so grateful to see it portrayed in a film because they feel the forgiveness and they understand that they're forgiven, that no one goes so far as to be outside the reach of the Father's hand, that they're so loved, and that's the overwhelming response, is that most people feel so healed from it.
Thank God for that. And also just to say, for anybody who has been affected by the film in a particular way, please reach out to Women Hurt who are here today. Make sure that you connect up with them, or perhaps you might be able to help somebody who might want to talk to somebody from Women Hurt. So that's just really important. What about just the impact on you personally, Ashley? Because this film must have been extremely, I mean, I can imagine from the actor's perspective, you really have to get into the role. I mean, you have to imagine what it was like to have had 2 abortions. How did it affect you?
It was probably 7 weeks of complete torture. I knew going into the film that it was going to be emotionally, physically demanding, mentally demanding, and that I needed to do a ton of research to understand everything. But at the end of the day, I was able to go home and say, okay, this isn't my life. I feel deep pain for this, but it's not my life. It's not my truth. I just understand it. More so than just the film, though, I think that the last year of my life is what I didn't expect. I didn't expect to become so involved and really just inspired by the role to go out and be a part of the pro-life movement, to really be a voice and be fighting alongside of you all. And that's been probably the most challenging thing.
You've been all over the world now at this stage.
I have. There's a lot of places and a lot of countries that I've now visited for the first time.
Ireland's your favorite, though.
It
obviously.
is my favorite. I'm not kidding.
The film is an eye-opener in many different ways. The abortion procedure itself, but also the scene where your character has taken the abortion pill. You know, something that certainly the way it's portrayed here in the Irish media is as if it's very rose-tinted the way it's portrayed. It's, you know, simple, just take these tablets, but it's horrific. That scene standing in the shower where, you know, this induced miscarriage is happening. Do you think people know that this is what happens when women take these pills?
No, I think that the general public has no idea. And I think that, especially in the States, Planned Parenthood is doing a great job at marketing it and saying, oh, it's easy, it's just a pill, you don't even have to have a doctor with you. Well, that's a pretty horrific experience to go through when you don't have a doctor with you. I've had a friend who had a miscarriage, who sometimes you have to use the same pill to carry through with your miscarriage, and she said her experience was very similar to what Abby experienced. And it happens way more frequently than anyone lets on. There are people dying from taking this pill. And the media is not talking about it. No
And
one's
that
talking
is
about
a
it.
scary, something that certainly I'm sure most people find quite scary is, and everything in this movie is true, you know, that the scene about the young girl who nearly dies, but she nor her father don't even know that that's what nearly happened.
Right.
Is this happening in abortion clinics?
Yes, and this is testimony from more than one abortion clinic worker. I mean, all of this is straight from Abby, who had an insider perspective working in the clinic. But Abby also has an organization called And Then There Were None. And her mission is to help get clinic workers out of the clinics. And to date, she's had around 500 abortion clinic workers leave abortion clinics. That's a huge testimony.
One of the things that also I think people need to be aware of, and it's very disturbing when the movie is portraying that scene at the Planned Parenthood conference, when your character kind of stands up and questions this marketing, you know, almost kind of sales targets for abortions. I wouldn't think a lot of people are aware that this is something that goes on.
Well, it's because, like I said, Planned Parenthood has this unified voice and excellent marketing. I feel like in the pro-life movement, that is one thing that is very much lacking, is that we need a unified voice. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great, though, if we had our own brand, you know, that could compete and was marketed as such? Because that's what we need, because Planned Parenthood is so together and in unity about what they want to do, and that they're blindsiding young women because they're telling us it's all about reproductive health, it's all about women's rights. You hear all this from pro-choicers, it's all about women's rights. Well, what is that right? That right is to choose what? To choose to take another life when you get down to the root of it? And they're not talking about that. It's become so politicized, which I think is what you're seeing here in Ireland now. What's
your advice then for people here in Ireland? I mean, we have suffered really a huge blow to the pro-life movement in Ireland with the passage of abortion legislation here in this country. But you have hope for the future. I mean, in the United States, obviously, it's something you've been fighting against for a long time. What's your message to people today?
Don't give up. Don't lose hope. Even just being in this movement for a little over a year, I understand what it's like to have compassion fatigue, to get to a point where you feel like, is my voice being heard? Does anybody even care? And to have a sense of defeat almost in the last year can be a hard thing. But even if you reach one person, if one person changes their mind or one baby is born because of something that you've done, then that's worth it. Your work is not in vain. And I think that's important to remember. And what was being said earlier about culture and law, to change the law, you have to stir it in the culture, and you have to touch people's hearts. That's where it starts. Abortion is an issue of the heart. So if we want to change people's minds, we have to treat them with love, respect, provide resources, and no one can argue with that.
Yes, hear, hear. And in terms of changing hearts and minds, I think that's something that this movie can achieve, right? So hopefully we'll be able to promote it on DVD in Ireland soon. How would you advise us to try and keep getting people to connect up with the Unplanned film?
I bet that everyone in here has a pro-choice friend. And if you have a pro-choice friend, they are your friend because they respect you for some reason and they love you. I challenge you to challenge them to watch the movie, because no matter what you believe, you should know why you believe it. And if you're so firm in your stance of being pro-choice, there's no reason to be worried that a movie could change your mind, right? So challenge everyone that you know to go and see the movie so that they know what they stand for.
Well, that's really good advice, and I hope everybody takes it on board from Ashley today. Because when the DVD was released on Amazon in the US, it went to #1. Yes. So let's have that happening here as well. Let's keep that rolling. Let's keep that success rolling. And Ashley, I'm delighted to hear that you're going to be producing your own film, and as you mentioned, you've got a lot of great opportunities coming your way, so I have a feeling it's not going to be the last film that people here will see you in today. So we wish you all the best of luck with everything that is to come, the work that you're continuing to do for the pro-life cause, and thank you so much for visiting us here in Ireland today.
Thank you all.